Howdy, y'all. Welcome. That's not how I start videos. Reroll that. Hey RV family, keep it high, keep it tight. My name is Jay Morse, the Review Guy, back again to bring you another video. It's that time of the month, and no, I don't mean my period. See, if you beat people to a joke, they can't tell you the joke. Guess I'm just a prick like that. Anyways, I got a list to get to. It's the time of the month for albums I liked. This is my series in which I go over my favorite records from the previous month, the records that I enjoyed the most, in case you weren't able to catch up on all my reviews. I also list all of the album reviews in the description below, so if you want to go check out my in-depth thoughts, you can, because I'm never going to be able to talk as much about them as I'd like, as I did in those in-depth reviews, so if any of them interest you, go check them out. Just hoping that you check these all out, because these are my favorite records, and I highly recommend all of them. I think that goes without saying. One thing I will say is this was a month that I just loved so many records. By far, even though some of my favorite records were released in previous months, last month was the most chock full of great records months that I've had pretty much in my entire YouTube career. It was just such a strong month with so many records that I really fell in love with for different reasons, so let's go ahead and get right into it. Number one, I'm going to give a shout out to Bad Omens with Finding God Before God Finds Me. Very surprised by what they did following their self-titled release, where it did somewhat sound like Bring Me the Horizon worship, specifically Sempiternal era Bring Me the Horizon, but Finding God Before God Finds Me just shows that they are just capable songwriters that can write simultaneously but hard-hitting tracks at the same time. I mean, a track like Dethrone doesn't fit in at all, but it just works, and you have tracks like If I'm There. Oh my god, such emotion, such heartfelt songwriting. Really loving this record. Next up we have Tomb Mold with Planetary Clairvoyance. $20 spin, dropping some of the best death metal, period, right now. This is very much in the vein of old school death metal, old, grimy, gritty. Really loving this record, one of my favorite death metal records of the year. And next up we have Clairo with Immunity, one of my favorite singer-songwriter records of the year. I know that there were a lot of people that didn't really like this record. I personally like what she was doing on this record. I think she might be somewhat of an indescript vocalist and a nondescript vocalist, but I personally felt like this record has this sweet, kind of endearing, nostalgic quality to it that I can't get enough of. This is probably one of the records from last month that I'm going back to the most. I really enjoyed it. Next up, I gotta give a shout out to Slipknot with We Are Not Your Kind. I've talked about this record to death. Everyone's talked about this record to death. They bounced back from some of their weakest material yet with their past, in my opinion, two records. Wasn't a big fan of the past two. I really enjoyed their original material, and I think this kind of goes back into the vein of that original material, but still experiments and goes off the beaten path a little bit. I like that Slipknot is, in this part of their career, able to experiment and do things that are advancing their sound, that is evolving their sound, but not losing their signature rage and aggression kind of angst and anger and rage and just punk. It's so mad. They sound so mad. Really like this record. Next up we have Northlane with Alien. Really enjoyed this record as a gen, as a progressive metal record, a progressive metalcore record. There's been quite a few really nice gent records this year. It's coming to my mind like Periphery. You have Periphery, you have Glass Crown, and now you have Northlane. They move more into an alt metal sound. Like straight up, a lot of these tracks function somewhat like Linkin Park, specifically like on the track, I believe it's called like 3D 40, I believe it's called, or 3D, something like that. I can't remember off the top of my head, but very alt metal inspired from the way the riffs function to the way that the vocals function. Very aggressive though. It doesn't lose the edge that it encompassed on their previous material. Definitely not necessarily as technically proficient as some of their previous material. There's no track on here that in my opinion rivals something like Quantum Flux. This doesn't sound like their records like Singularity or Node or even Mesmer to some degree, so if you're expecting that, you're probably going to be let down a little bit. Next up, I have Heilung with Futha. I got to this record late because it took me weeks to formulate my review because I was so awestruck by this record. I don't really have much more to say. Go watch my review. I gave it a 10. That should say something. Next up, I have King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard with Infest the Rat's Nest. Wow. Who would have thunk that the Australian band would have come through with one of the best thrash metal albums in quite a few different years. I think it's only second to, in my opinion, the Legion of the Damned record that released back in like January, but King Gizzard just brings back this old spice and flair that thrash metal just doesn't have a lot of times, with this kind of muddied production, this fairly raw, rough around the edges, rigid production that I just love so much. Stu has the amazing vocal acrobatics of classic thrash metal, that rasp, that growl. It's just a fantastic record. Next up I have Shin with Azalea. I feel like a lot of people didn't see this review and have not listened to this record. I highly suggest it. It's one of the better J-rock and J-metal records to come out of Japan this year, in my opinion, from what I've heard from the previous vocalist of the prior vocalist of the band Vivid, the visual K-rock band. It also has some visual K-rock influences in some of these sounds, very alternative at times, very chuggy at certain times, very beautiful at certain times, such as on the self-titled track Azalea. Definitely check it out. I feel like this is a diamond in the rough that more people need to hear. Next up, I have Sleater-Kinney with The Center Won't Hold. The girls sound amazing on this record. I know that I got a little bit of backlash somewhat for liking this record as much as I did, because I know a lot of people didn't. I really do think that this built on their previous record in a logical fashion and made it interesting, made it full of flair, gave it some flavor, and it was a logical step up from what they had been previously doing on their previous records, specifically their last record. I think they're sounding better than ever. I think Carrie's vocals are sounding better than ever. I think a lot of the riffs are very punky, and just it has this ferocity that I haven't heard from Sleater-Kinney for a while, but they're not afraid to strip it back, tone it back a little bit, and kind of like Slipknot, kind of put some monkey wrenches in the bin and just like opening cans of worms and saying, let's see what this does, trying to experiment, trying to push their sound in new directions without losing their original flavor. Next up, I have Hoodie Allen with Whatever USA. This is one of the best pop records of the year by far. Not the best. It does have some pitfalls. I will not say that it doesn't have pitfalls. It certainly does fall into some of that contemporary luscious pits. Sounds a lot like Lauv, if you like Lauv. Maybe even a little bit of John Bellion at times without some of the glossy stuff that John Bellion does. But yeah, I can't really say anything much more about it. It's a nice pop rap album. Next up, I have Brockhampton, Ginger. Holy crap, is this a good record. It is so full of life, but it's sad. It's so sad. It's so depressing at the same time. Brockhampton is opening up and going full-on vulnerable, from Dearly Departed to Boy Bye. It's just so emotionally poignant. There's religious themes interwoven. Every single member gives their absolute all. Everyone's on top of their game. Just, it's a solid effort from a band that I think bumped back a little bit from Iridescence, which I wasn't that big of a fan of. Next up, I have Knocked Loose with A Different Shade of Blue. Best hardcore punk record of the year. I know that Anthony Fantano, I love you, brother. I really respect your channel, but the fact that you were calling this record deathcore is a little bit iffy for me, because this is so much more hardcore punk and metalcore inspired than anything. When I watched his review and I saw he was talking about deathcore and stuff, I was like, I'm very confused by that, because this is just some very chunky, heavy, hardcore punk mixed with metalcore in the vein of a band like Beartooth or something like that. It's much more hardcore punk than anything, specifically in the vocals. I'm not hearing that much deathcore or death metal, for that matter, in this influence. Really enjoyed this record. And then finally, no, not finally, there's two left, I'm stupid. We have Sedimented with Demo. Holy crap, this is a fantastic death doom metal record from the underground. Surprised quite a few people watched the review, because I didn't think many people were going to care, but surprisingly people were like, hey, nice, thanks for covering this. I really enjoyed this record. It is short, it's an EP technically, 17 minutes long, 4 tracks, and it is just chunky and coated in distortion and layers of hellish muck that just give it this horrific sound from start to finish. Really great compositions on this record. And now, finally, we have Tool, Fear Inoculum. Hopefully my review came out by the time this goes up. Wow. After 14 years, they come back in full spades with a vengeance. Maybe they're not taking that many risks, but they don't have to because their sound by itself is very avant-garde, very off the beaten path, very full of flavor, very great instrumentation. Maynard sounds absolutely timeless on this record from a vocal standard. The bass work, the guitar work, the drum work, full of just experimentation, technicality, but accessibility simultaneously. This is just a fantastic record. And I mean, I know there was one person that was like, you're just saying this because you know the Tool fanboys are gonna come after you. No, I like the record. I'm a music reviewer. I talk about music. It's this wacky thing. Wow, the music reviewer, he liked music. He liked the music. He think the music is good. Some people really need to just get a life, man. But yeah, those are my recommendations. Be sure to let me know what your favorite records of the month were. In the month of August, I would love to hear them. Maybe there was one that I missed that I can go back to and appreciate. Maybe there's one I disagree with. Whatever, I would love to discuss them with you. Be sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel. All of these reviews will be in the description box below, as well as the playlist to all the albums I liked, where you can see my favorite albums from every single month. If you are curious to know which ones I liked as the years progressed, I'll talk to you guys next time. My name is Jay Morse, the Review Guy, and I'm signing off saying farewell.